Arena in continuation.
Thank you, Speaker. This bill is totally a political one in nature. It is very much formed to be a wedge, a political wedge, to put privatisation on the agenda for the 2025 election. That's what Labor's doing. When Labor introduced its legislation establishing the National Broadband Network, it specifically said and contemplated a situation in which it could be sold, and the Act outlines a staged process under which the government's NBN co-stake can be sold down. Now, let's hear what some key stakeholders have had to say about this latest situation. Ziggy Sosowski, former chair of NBN, former chief executive of Telstra and Optus. The decision to hold NBN in government ownership is fine for the short term, say this decade, but beyond that horizon, why do it? It feels like the ban on nuclear power. Why do it? Paul Budd, telecommunications industry analyst, even if sold at the most recent valuation of $20 billion, that would still represent an enormous loss for taxpayers and would be a political disaster. And finding a buyer, even from overseas, would be difficult. And I do have a bit of a problem sometimes with overseas buyers, particularly for our strategic national assets. And I can well recall in the first year of the Abbott government when there was a proposal put forward to sell off the Grain Corp. And indeed Archer Daniels Midland, an American-owned company, which had a less than desirable track record in some of its corporate doings in the US, was going to buy what essentially was all the silos and all the infrastructure that my late father Lance and all the other wheat growers had paid for many times over. And what would that do to Australia? Well, it would determine how much wheat, how much grain we would grow, and particularly it would determine the price. And heavily subsidised US wheat growers would get an advantage over Australian wheat growers who grow the best hard wheat in the world. And our wheat growers would be put at a disadvantage. And we don't need that, particularly when Canada produces a lot of wheat, particularly when the world markets are crying out for our wheat. Why should the price of our wheat be determined around a boardroom table in Illinois, America? It's just not right, and I stood against it then, and I know that we made the right decision. And when it came to foreign investment, we changed the rules when we came to government around foreign investment, and particularly agricultural assets, particularly that. Now, with this particular bill, I must say we do have an Americanisation of the NBN. Recently I got fibre to the premises at my home and was horrified. I didn't actually ask for it, even when I was Deputy Prime Minister. I didn't want to get forward in the queue. I wanted to wait my turn. And quite frankly, ADSL2 was working just fine and had worked just fine, even when I ran a small business from home. A rather successful media company, I might say. But I do digress, Member for Solomon. I was alarmed to see FTTC on the paperwork for the NBN, fibre to the curb, CURB. I mean, this is Australia. Curb, which is the gutter along the sideway, call it what you like, along the bitumen, out the front of your house, out on the street, is KERB. And yet we just somehow we just get all this Americanisation just thrust upon us. And I appreciate they're our closest security partner, as they should be, and all the rest. But you know, when NBN and other companies are doing these sorts of programs and putting in place these sorts of glossy brochures, here's a tip: get it right. Spell it right. Spell it the Australian English version, not the one from America. Now, as I said, this is a stunt from a desperate and failing government. It very much is. They want privatisation to be on the agenda for the next scare campaign. They did so in 2016. Who will ever forget the bombardment of advertisements, particularly to younger families, about Medi-Scare? and it worked a treat, unfortunately, but they seem to forget their own record, their own shoddy record of privatisation. In the 1990s, the Treasurer's own idol, Prime Minister Paul Keating, privatised not only Qantas but also the Commonwealth Bank. Now, you could argue that, well, governments aren't there to run banks and aren't there to run airlines, and that may well be the case. But this government can't then try to bring on these scare campaigns at the 11th hour, just prior to an election, so that they then allege, and they will, wait for it, that under the new provisions that people will be paying more for the internet. People will be paying more to download and upload data. And this, let me tell you, is what is coming. Now, our position as the coalition will be opposing the bill. Our position is that we're not proposing a sale. We are very much economic rationalists and economic adults, unlike those opposite. They want to just politicise everything, as they always do. We will take a responsible approach, and we'll do it in a way that is best for the consumer, best for the Australian public. Now, at a time when Australians need help desperately with the cost of living crisis, a cost of living crisis brought about under Labor, a cost of living crisis that Labor didn't even acknowledge or recognise until after the voice vote was lost. They cared way more about a divisive referendum that cost $450 million and did nothing but create divisions within this country. They were not talking about cost of living then. They seem to have caught up now, but sometimes it's too little too late. And they're running around scaring everybody with proposals such as this, scaring everybody, saying that they will manage the economy when in fact they have not. We'll take this bill in the usual way. It's a farcical approach from the Albanese government. And, you know, you look at their record in so many times, in so many aspects. And the Prime Minister has only mentioned, has mentioned NBN only 6 times in the parliament this year, most recently as the 3rd of July. And that was quite some time ago, quite some months ago. And the 6th time was about how NBN Sky Muster, the NBN satellite, was helping Indigenous communities, which was on the 13th of February 2024. And then all of a sudden, in the second last week of sittings of the federal parliament for 2024, when who knows when the election is just around the corner, we find ourselves with a debate such as this plonked on the table, and of course the urgency to debate it, the urgency to pass it, the urgency for Labor to pretend as though they're getting on board with the policies that matter to Australians. Well, the policies that matter to Australians are cost of living. The policies that matter to Australians are the price of groceries. The policies that matter to Australians should be around the cost of fuel, because every time people go to the Bowser, they're paying more and more and more. Every time they get their energy bills, they're higher and higher and higher. And that is what the general public are talking about. That's the barbecue stopper. It's not the ownership of broadband, the NBN at the moment. It is making sure that if they are in regional Australia, they have connectivity, that they have mobile phones which actually have service. And I mentioned yesterday about the situation at Ardlethan and Camara, where farmers are being forced to climb silos during times of medical emergencies, and the Grinter family had to do just that, just to get reception, just to get a bar on their phone so that they could make an urgent call because there was a medical crisis. And this is simply not good enough. And when Labor brings out its latest round of mobile phone tower installations and infrastructure, they put them all in Labor electorates. And they came to the election saying they'd be far more transparent and far more accountable and far more honest in their dealings when it came to funding initiatives, particularly in regional Australia. And what did they do? They had a spreadsheet which was all red, all Labor. I say shame on Labor for just that. And all well and good if you're in a Labor seat and got one of the mobile phone towers, but not good enough if you're in a coalition seat, and we hold more regional seats than Labor, and we missed out unfairly, unjustifiably. I don't know how Labor members can come to the dispatch box and come to the microphone and then argue that they are being more accountable when it comes to funding such as that, particularly for regional areas. But this is just another scare campaign. It's just Labor trying to get their house in order prior to the election. Shame on them.